Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. Dear friend, imagine this. A rainy night in a shabby little corner of Savannah Grove, where the streets whisper secrets and the air smells of cornflakes and broken dreams. Imagine a rough-and-tumble guitarist named Emma Riley strumming her guitar under a broken streetlight, just hoping to make it through. Then there's Ethan, a kid who hasn't moved, hasn't spoken for 3 long years, trapped in silence since a tragedy no one talks about. But here's the twist. When Emma's music plays, the impossible happens. Ethan's fingers twitch, his feet tap. So what will it be, a miracle or a mess? Stay here, because this story has twists and turns you won't see coming. Subscribe and comment where you're watching the video, and we'll get started right now. The air in Savannah Grove hung heavy that evening, thick with the scent of fried cornbread from a rusted food cart and the faint tang of spilled beer from the bar across the street. Old Hollow, the scrappy little heart of the city, buzzed with its usual chaos. Neon signs flickered above pawn shops and dive bars, casting jagged pools of light onto the cracked pavement. Somewhere down the block, a street preacher hollered about salvation, his voice drowned out by the wail of a saxophone spilling from an open window. It was the kind of night where the South showed its soul, gritty, loud, and unapologetic. Emma Riley stood under a flickering street lamp, her worn-out boots planted firm on the sidewalk. Her guitar, a scratched-up Gibson she'd scored from a yard sale 10 years back, rested against her hip like an old friend. She was 28, but the lines around her eyes made her look older. Too many late nights, too many empty pockets. Her dark hair hung in a messy braid over one shoulder, and her faded denim jacket smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and rain. She strummed a slow blues riff, letting the notes drift into the humid air, hoping they'd snag a few bucks from the passers-by. The crowd was thin tonight. A couple of tourists tossed quarters into her beat-up trucker hat, barely glancing her way. A drunk guy stumbled past, muttering something about the devil's music. Emma didn't care. She played for herself as much as for them, her fingers dancing over the strings like they were tracing a map out of this nowhere life. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw him. A kid, couldn't have been more than 10, sat in a wheelchair at the edge of the curb. His skinny legs were tucked under a blanket, and his brown eyes, wide and unblinking, locked onto her. He wasn't just another face in the crowd, not one of those half-interested gawkers who'd toss a dime and keep walking. No, this kid watched her, like her music was pulling something out of him he didn't even know was there. Emma tilted her head, smirking a little. "Come on, kid. Don't just sit there staring. Give me something," she muttered under her breath, not expecting an answer. He didn't move, didn't speak. But those eyes, they were louder than any words. She shifted her stance, letting the blues fade into something softer, a melody her mama used to hum when the world got too heavy. The notes curled through the air, weaving past the honk of a car horn and the chatter of a group of college kids stumbling out of a bar. And then it happened. The boy's fingers, small, pale, curled against the armrest of his chair, twitched, just a little at first, like a reflex he couldn't control. Then they tapped, slow and shaky, matching the rhythm of her song. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know this kid, didn't know his story, but damn if that tiny movement didn't feel like a victory. She grinned, leaning into the music, her strums growing bolder, brighter. The blues turned into something alive, something hopeful, and for a minute, Old Hollow didn't feel so broken. Across the street, James Carter sat in the back of his sleek black SUV, one hand gripping his phone, the other clenched into a fist. He was 42, all sharp edges and tailored suits, the kind of guy who built an empire, Carter Tech, out of nothing but grit and numbers. His driver idled at the light, waiting for the green, while James barked orders into his Bluetooth about some merger gone sideways. But then he saw Ethan, his son, his little boy, who used to tear through their backyard chasing fireflies, who used to laugh so loud it'd wake the neighbors. That Ethan was gone. Had been for 3 years, ever since the accident. A defective piece of equipment, a fall, a spinal injury that stole his legs and his voice. Now, Ethan was a ghost, a quiet shell who stared at walls and ignored the world. Therapy, specialists, money. James had thrown it all at him, and nothing worked. Until now. James dropped the phone mid-sentence, his breath catching in his throat. Ethan's hand, his hand, was moving, tapping, keeping time with the music from that scruffy girl with the guitar. He leaned forward, pressing a palm against the tinted window. "Wait," he snapped at the driver. "Don't move the damn car yet." Emma didn't see James, didn't know some rich guy in a fancy ride was watching her like she'd just cracked a code he'd spent years trying to solve. She was too caught up in the kid, Ethan, though she didn't know his name yet. She finished the song with a flourish, letting the last note hang in the air like a question. The boy's hand stilled, but his eyes stayed on her, bright and alive in a way that made her chest ache. "You like that, huh?" she said, loud enough for him to hear, flashing a crooked grin. "All right, little man, this one's for you." She launched into another tune, something fast and twangy, her fingers flying over the strings. Ethan's foot, stiff and awkward, shifted against the metal plate of his chair, just an inch. But it was enough. Emma laughed, a short, sharp sound that cut through the night. Whoever this kid was, he was in there, listening, feeling, and she was damn well gonna keep playing for him. James couldn't breathe. His pulse hammered in his ears as he watched Ethan's foot move, to the beat. He hadn't seen his son respond to anything. Not toys, not TV, not the endless parade of doctors in years. But this girl, this nobody with a busted guitar, had done it in 10 minutes flat. The light turned green, and the driver glanced back, waiting for a nod. James didn't give it. He just stared, his mind racing, his throat tight with something he hadn't felt in forever. Hope. When the song ended, Emma lowered her guitar, wiping sweat off her brow with the back of her hand. She looked at Ethan, really looked at him this time, and saw something shift in those deep brown eyes. A spark. A connection. She didn't know what it meant, but it hit her like a freight train. James stepped out of the car, his polished loafers clicking against the pavement. He crossed the street, ignoring the stares from a couple of barflies leaning against a wall. Emma turned, startled as he stopped a few feet away, his face unreadable but his voice steady. "You don't know what you just did," he said, "but I need you to keep doing it. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Blue Magnolia Cafe. Meet me there." Emma blinked, her guard snapping up like a steel trap. She wasn't used to suits talking to her, let alone making cryptic demands. "Look, mister," she said, hefting her guitar onto her shoulder. "I don't play for suits. What's this about?" He didn't answer right away, just glanced back at Ethan, who was still watching her. "It's important," he said finally, then turned and walked back to his car without another word. Emma frowned, her stomach twisting. She caught a glimpse of a woman in the crowd, tall, prim, with glasses perched on her nose, staring at her with a look that could freeze fire. Something about it set her nerves on edge, but she shook it off. She packed up her gear, the night settling back into its usual hum, and trudged home to her tiny apartment above a laundromat. Later, sprawled on her lumpy mattress, she stared at the cracked ceiling, James's words looping in her head. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "I saw what you did. Blue Magnolia, 2 p.m. Don't be late." She tossed the phone onto the nightstand, muttering, "What the hell did I just step into?" Hey, y'all. What do you think Emma's gonna do? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Should she trust this guy or run the other way? Things are just getting started." The next day dragged in slow and sticky, the kind of Savannah Grove afternoon where the humidity clung to your skin like a second shirt. Emma Riley woke up to the rumble of dryers downstairs and the faint smell of mildew seeping through her apartment's thin walls. She rolled off the mattress, rubbing sleep from her eyes, James Carter's text still nagging at her like a splinter she couldn't pull out. Blue Magnolia Cafe at 2 p.m. She didn't know what this guy wanted, but her gut told her it was trouble, and her gut was rarely wrong. Still, curiosity won out. She threw on a cleanish flannel shirt, grabbed her guitar, and headed out. Old Hollow was quieter in the daylight. The neon signs dimmed, the streets littered with crumpled cans and cigarette butts from last night's chaos. She passed Ruby Jones's usual spot, a rickety bench where the old sax player liked to sit and blow mournful tunes. But Ruby wasn't there today. Emma frowned. Ruby had been her lifeline once, teaching her chords when she was just a scrawny kid with big dreams. They hadn't talked much lately, not since Emma took off for the city, but she figured she'd catch her later. Blue Magnolia Cafe sat on the edge of downtown, a world away from Old Hollow's grit. The place screamed money, polished wood tables, glass chandeliers, and the rich, buttery scent of fresh-baked scones mixing with espresso. Emma felt like a stray dog wandering into a country club, her boots scuffing the pristine floor as she stepped inside. A waiter in a crisp white shirt raised an eyebrow, but before he could say anything, a voice cut through the hum of soft jazz. "Emma Riley?" She turned. James Carter sat at a corner table, his charcoal suit sharp as a blade, his dark eyes locked on her. He didn't smile, but there was something in his gaze, not cold, not warm, just heavy. She adjusted the guitar strap on her shoulder and slid into the seat across from him, ignoring the stares from a couple of tech bros sipping lattes nearby. "All right, suit," she said, leaning back. "You got me here. What's the deal?" James didn't waste time. "My name's James Carter. That boy you played for last night, he's my son, Ethan." He paused, like saying the name cost him something. "He hasn't moved, hasn't reacted to anything, not since the accident 3 years ago. Until you." Emma blinked, the pieces clicking into place. The kid in the wheelchair, those big eyes, the way his fingers danced to her song. "Wait, hold up," she said. "You're telling me that little man's yours? And he don't usually move?" "Not a twitch," James said, his voice low. "Doctors, therapists, specialists, I've tried it all. Nothing worked. Then you strummed that guitar and he came alive. I don't care if you've got no fancy degree. My boy moved because of you." Her stomach did a flip. "So what? You want me to play for him again? I ain't no miracle worker." "I want more than that," James said, leaning forward, his hands clasped tight. "I want you to teach him. Music. Whatever you did last night, keep doing it." Emma let out a short, nervous laugh. "You're kidding, right? I'm no teacher, man. I just play what I feel. I don't even read sheet music half the time." "I don't care," he shot back, firm but not harsh. "I care about results. You got through to him when no one else could." She chewed her lip, staring at the coffee cup she hadn't touched. This was insane. She was a street rat with a guitar, not some music therapist. But those eyes, Ethan's eyes, flashed in her mind, and something tugged at her, something she couldn't shake. "Fine," she said finally, exhaling. "I'll give it a shot, but don't expect me to turn into Mary Poppins." James nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. My place. I'll send a car." The Carter estate was like something out of a damn movie. Sprawling lawns, oak trees dripping with Spanish moss, and a mansion that looked more like a museum than a home. The driver dropped Emma off at the front steps, and she stood there, guitar case in hand, feeling like a fish flopping on dry land. The air smelled of cut grass and money, but inside it was sterile. Marble floors, chandeliers, and not a speck of dust. No toys, no mess, no life. James led her through the foyer, his steps clipped and rehearsed. "Ethan's room is this way," he said, his voice echoing off the walls. Emma followed, her eyes darting to the paintings, pricey, perfect, and cold. This wasn't a house. It was a tomb. She met the welcoming committee soon enough. Ruth Grayson, a tall woman with silver-rimmed glasses and a navy blazer, stood in the hallway like a guard dog. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she sized Emma up. "Miss Riley," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "You're out of your depth here. Ethan needs structure, not some hippie with a guitar." Emma bristled, forcing a grin. "Good to meet you too, lady. I'm here to help, not start a war." Then there was Tommy Wells, the house manager, a wiry guy in a vest who looked like he'd ironed his frown. "Ethan's schedule is tight," he said, arms crossed. "Don't mess it up." "Wouldn't dream of it," Emma muttered, her jaw tight. Later that day, she ran into Ruby Jones back in Old Hollow. The old woman sat on her bench, sacks resting on her lap, her gray curls wild under a faded hat. "Heard you're cozying up with the Carters," Ruby said, her voice rough as gravel. "You're playing for the enemy now, girl. Don't forget where you came from." Emma froze. "Enemy? What are you talking about?" Ruby's eyes narrowed. "Carter techs pushing to tear down half this neighborhood, turn it into some shiny mall. You think that suit cares about us?" The words hit like a punch. Emma thought of James, his fancy house, his desperation for Ethan. Was he really part of this? She shook her head. "I'm just trying to help a kid, Ruby. That's it." Ruby snorted. "Keep telling yourself that." The next morning, Emma sat across from Ethan in the Carters' massive living room, her guitar propped against her knee. The kid stared at the floor, hands limp in his lap, his wheelchair parked by a grand piano nobody seemed to touch. She'd been coming here for a couple days now, and he barely looked at her. Most folks would have quit by now, but Emma wasn't most folks. She picked up the guitar and started playing. No plan, no scales, just a wandering tune that felt right. The notes spilled out, soft and warm, filling the cavernous room. She watched Ethan out of the corner of her eye, waiting. Then it happened. His fingers twitched, just like that first night. Her breath caught. She kept going, letting the music stretch and bend, and his body tensed, like he was fighting something inside. After a while, he reached for a sketch pad on the table beside him. His hand shook as he scratched out a drawing. Her, with her guitar, under a street lamp. Emma stopped playing, her throat tightening. She blinked back tears, whispering, "Well, I'll be damned, little man." James walked in just then, freezing in the doorway. He saw the sketch, saw Ethan's focused eyes, and his face crumpled for a split second before he masked it. "That's good," he said, voice rough. But then his gaze shifted, landing on Emma with a flicker of doubt. "You were out there last night talking to some kid. Billy, they call him. What's that about?" Emma's stomach dropped. Billy was a street punk, a pickpocket she'd caught nicking her tips once. She'd let him off with a warning, and he'd stuck around since, like a stray cat. "He's just a kid I know," she said, defensive. "What's it to you?" James didn't answer, but the suspicion in his eyes said enough. That night, her phone buzzed again. Another text, no name. "Stay away from the Carters. You don't belong there. Things are heating up, folks. Will Emma stick with Ethan or fight for her people? Subscribe and let me know your guesses in the comments. This ride's only getting wilder. The night was dark and restless in Old Hollow. The kind of dark where the streetlights flickered like they were giving up. Emma Riley sat on a milk crate outside her apartment, guitar resting against her knee, the air thick with the smell of burnt grease from a nearby diner and the distant bark of a stray dog. Her phone sat beside her, that damn text glowing in the shadows. "Stay away from the Carters, you don't belong there." She'd ignored it for 2 days, but it gnawed at her, same as James's suspicion and Ruby's cold words. She was in deep now, and she didn't know how to climb out. She strummed a few aimless chords, trying to shake the weight pressing on her chest. Ethan's sketch, the shaky lines of her and her guitar, kept flashing in her mind. That kid saw her, really saw her, in a way nobody had since her little brother Danny died 10 years back. Danny'd been like Ethan once, trapped in a body that wouldn't work right, a car wreck stealing his legs and his spark. She'd played for him too, back then, until he slipped away. Helping Ethan felt like a second chance, but now it was all slipping through her fingers. A shadow moved down the block and she squinted. Billy, the scrawny street kid with a mop of dirty blonde hair, shuffled toward her, hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets. He was 14, maybe 15. All sharp edges and quick hands. Caught him snagging her tips once, but she'd let it slide. He'd been hanging around ever since, like he didn't have anywhere else to go. "Yo, Em," he said, kicking at a pebble. "You look like hell." "Thanks, kid," she snorted, setting the guitar down. "What's up? Ain't you got wallets to lift?" He smirked, then pulled out a beat-up laptop from his backpack, a relic he'd probably swiped from some dumpster. "Found something you might want to see. Been poking around online, for fun. Hacked into some emails. Check this." Emma raised an eyebrow but leaned in as he flipped the screen open. A string of messages loaded up, names she didn't recognize at first, until she saw Ruth Grayson and Victor Hayes. Her gut twisted. Ruth, that stuck-up consultant at the Carter place, and Victor Hayes, some big-shot rival of James's company, Carter Tech. She'd heard his name tossed around Old Hollow, usually with a curse attached. "Keep reading," Billy said, tapping the screen. She did. The emails were coded, vague, but damning. Ruth was feeding Victor info, Carter Tech's weak spots, James's stress over Ethan, even a plan to push some shady contract that'd tank the company if James signed it. One line made her blood run cold. "Get the girl out. She's a liability. Frame her if you have to." Attached was a blurry photo. Emma, shaking hands with Victor at a gig a month back. She'd played for a private party, cash up front, no questions asked. She hadn't known who he was then. "You're telling me this lady's selling out Ethan's dad?" Emma whispered, her voice shaking. "And setting me up to take the fall?" Billy shrugged. "Looks like it. Ruth's playing dirty, Em. I ain't no hero, but I figured you'd want to know. I just wanted a burger out of this, honest." Emma's hands clenched into fists. She'd been played by Ruth, by Victor, maybe even by James's blind trust in the wrong people. She stood, pacing, her boots scuffing the pavement. "We gotta do something," she said. "This ain't just about me anymore." The next day, she marched into the Carter mansion, heart pounding, but head high. She'd barely set her guitar down in Ethan's room when James stormed in, his face hard as stone. He tossed a manila envelope onto the piano, photos spilling out, her and Victor, same as the email. Her stomach dropped. "I trusted you," he said, voice low and sharp. "And you stabbed me in the back." Emma's breath caught. "You're blind, James. Look at who's really holding the knife." He didn't flinch. "I saw you with that kid. Billy. Now this? You're working with Hayes, aren't you? What's he paying you to get close to us?" She stepped forward, furious. "You think I'd sell out Ethan? That boy's the only reason I'm here. Those photos, someone set me up. I played a gig, took a tip. That's it. You want to talk betrayal? Look at your own damn house. James's jaw tightened, but he didn't budge. I want you out. Now. Don't come near Ethan again. The words hit like a slap. She grabbed her guitar, throat burning, and stormed out, past Ruth's smug stare in the hallway, past Tommy's silent judgment. She didn't stop until she hit Old Hollow, where the rain had started, a cold, miserable drizzle that soaked her to the bone. Ruby was there, sitting under an awning with her sacks, watching the protest signs going up. Carter's bulldozers are coming, she said, not looking at Emma. You picking their side over ours? Emma's chest ached. I ain't picking nobody, Ruby. I'm trying to save a kid. Ruby scoffed. You're blind as he is. I told him you'd flake. Even took a gig off it. Last show at the Blue Note thanks to you falling apart. Emma froze. You sold me out? For a stage? Ruby didn't answer, just blew a low, bitter note on her sax. Emma turned away, rain mixing with the tears she wouldn't let fall. She sat on a curb, pulled out her guitar, and played. A raw, desperate tune that screamed everything she couldn't say. Billy found her there, soaked and shivering. She's messing with Ethan too, he said, voice quiet. Heard Ruth's pushing some therapy crap. Harsh stuff. Kid's shaking worse now. Emma's hands stilled on the strings. Ethan, her little man, the one who'd drawn her, was hurting, and she'd been kicked out like trash. She'd lost James's trust, Ruby's respect, and maybe her last shot at fixing something broken. The music faded, and she buried her face in her hands, rain dripping through her fingers. 2 nights later, she sat in a dingy diner with Billy, the laptop open again. She'd spent every waking hour digging, emails, rumors, anything to prove Ruth was the snake. Then she found it. A leaked memo from Victor's company, dated 3 years back. A defective lift system, Hayes's design, had collapsed at a Carter Tech site. Ethan had been there, a kid tagging along with his dad. That's what took his legs, his voice, his everything. Ruth knew. She'd covered it up, kept James in the dark, and now she was using it to bury him. Emma's pulse raced. This is it, she said, snapping a screenshot. James needs to see this. Billy frowned. He kicked you out, Em. Why you still fightin'? She looked out the rain-streaked window, seeing Ethan's sketch in her mind. 'Cause that kid deserves better than this mess, and so does Old Hollow. She grabbed her phone, typed fast. James, I know who set me up. Meet me. I can prove it. She hit send, heart in her throat, and waited. A minute later, a reply buzzed back. Where? Outside your office, she texted. Now. She stood, guitar slung over her back, rain still dripping from her hair. Billy watched her go, muttering, You're crazy, Em. Maybe, she said, stepping into the storm. But I ain't done yet. The Carter Tech building loomed ahead, all glass and steel, a fortress in the night. James waited under the awning, arms crossed, eyes wary. Emma strode up, soaked and fearless, and dropped the folder of evidence at his feet. You were wrong about me, she said, voice steady, and I can prove it. He hesitated, rain drumming around them, then bent to pick it up. Silence stretched as he flipped through, emails, the memo, the truth about Ethan's accident. His hands shook, his face paling. Ruth, he whispered, then looked up, eyes raw. She did this? She's been playing you, Emma said, and I'm the one paying for it. James swallowed hard, the weight of it crashing down. I didn't want to believe it, he said, voice breaking. But I did. Emma didn't soften. Yeah, and you pushed away the one person who gave a damn about Ethan. He didn't argue. He just stood there, rain soaking his suit, as Emma turned to walk away, leaving him with the truth. Emma's down, but not out. Can she turn this around? Hit subscribe and tell me, who's the real villain here? Things are about to explode, y'all. The rain had stopped by the time Emma Riley reached Old Hollow, but the streets still glistened under the sodium glow of streetlights, puddles reflecting the jagged edges of Savannah Grove's soul. She stood outside James Carter's office, her boots planted firm on wet asphalt, guitar slung across her back like a shield. The folder she'd dropped at his feet, the emails, the memo about Ethan's accident, lay scattered where he'd left them, pages curling in the damp air. James hadn't followed her when she walked away, but she could feel his eyes on her back, heavy with regret. She didn't care about his apologies yet. She cared about Ethan, her little man, the kid who'd drawn her under a street lamp like she was some kind of hero. And Old Hollow, the beat-up neighborhood that had raised her, now facing Carter Tech's bulldozers. She'd lost too much already. Ruby's trust, James's faith, her own damn confidence. But she wasn't losing them too. Not without a fight. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from James. "Come back to the house, please." She stared at it, jaw tight, then typed a quick okay and headed out. The drive over in her rattling pickup felt like forever, the night air cold against her still damp flannel. When she pulled up to the Carter estate, the mansion loomed like a ghost, grand, silent, and hollow. James met her at the door, his suit wrinkled, his face etched with something she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. "I was wrong," he said, voice rough as gravel. "About you, about Ruth. I let her twist me up and I hurt you. I'm sorry, Emma. Truly." She crossed her arms, studying him. "It ain't me you need to make it up to. Ethan's the one caught in this mess." He nodded, slow and heavy. "I know, but I need you here. For him, and maybe for something bigger." "Bigger?" She raised an eyebrow, skeptical. He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "I've been thinking. Kids like Ethan, lost, shut off. There's thousands of them out there. Therapy don't always work. Money don't fix it. But you reached him with that guitar. I want you to run a music program, Emma, for kids who need it, not just Ethan. All of them." Her breath caught. "You're nuts. I ain't no big shot organizer. I'm just a street player who got through to my son when nobody else could." He cut in, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You don't need a degree for that." She chewed her lip, mind racing. It was insane. Her, running some program, but the idea lit something in her, a spark she hadn't felt since Danny was alive. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Take it," he replied. "But I ain't given up on this." 2 days later, Old Hollow was alive with noise. Not the usual bar fights or honking horns, but chants and stomping feet. A crowd had gathered in the square, signs scrawled with "Save Our Streets" and "No Bulldozers," swaying in the breeze. Ruby Jones stood at the front, sax in hand, leading the protest against Carter Tech's plan to flatten the neighborhood. Emma watched from the edge, guitar case at her feet, her stomach in knots. She'd avoided Ruby since their fight, but this was bigger than pride. She stepped forward, catching Ruby's eye. The old woman's face hardened, but Emma didn't back down. "I ain't here to argue," she said, loud enough to carry. "I'm here to fight with y'all." Ruby snorted. "Too late for that, girl. You picked your side." "No," Emma shot back. "I picked Ethan, and now I'm picking this place. Watch me." She swung her guitar around, planted herself in the middle of the crowd, and started playing, a fierce rolling blues that echoed off the crumbling buildings. Heads turned, feet tapped, and the protest took on a new rhythm. Billy darted through the crowd, passing out flyers he'd scribbled up. Music saves Old Hollow. Then the mansion's black SUV rolled up, and James stepped out, Ethan's wheelchair beside him. Emma's hands faltered on the strings. James pushed Ethan forward, the boy's eyes wide as he took in the chaos. "What are you doing here?" she called over the music. "Showing you I mean it," James yelled back. "No bulldozers, no demolition. We're keeping Old Hollow alive." The crowd roared, but Emma's focus locked on Ethan. She knelt beside him, guitar still humming. "Hey, little man," she said soft. "This one's for you." She played, a melody she'd made up for Danny years ago, tender and strong. Ethan's hands twitched, then lifted, shaky but sure, reaching for her. And then, in a voice so quiet it nearly drowned in the noise, he said, "Emma." Her heart stopped. The crowd hushed, James froze, and Ruby's sax fell silent. Ethan's brown eyes met hers, a tiny smile breaking through. "Emma," he whispered again, louder this time. Tears stung her eyes as she laughed, a raw, broken sound. "Well, hell, little man. You're talking." James dropped to his knees beside Ethan, hands trembling as he touched his son's face. "You're back," he choked out. "You're back." The protest turned into a celebration. Cheers, music, people hugging strangers in the street. Emma stood, wiping her face, and caught Ruby's gaze. The old woman nodded, just once, and raised her sax to join in. Billy whooped, tossing flyers like confetti. Weeks later, the square in Old Hollow glowed with new light, not from neon, but from a little brick building with a sign, Hollow Notes Music Center. Inside, Emma tuned her guitar, kids milling around her, some in wheelchairs, some with scars, all with stories. Ethan sat at a small keyboard picking out notes, while James watched from the doorway, a quiet awe in his eyes. Ruby shuffled in, sax under her arm. "Guess I was wrong about you," she grumbled, but her tone was soft. "Guess we're even then," Emma grinned. "You playing with us today?" "Damn right," Ruby said, lifting her horn. Billy poked his head in, a grin splitting his face. "Found a drum set out back. I called dibs." Emma laughed, and the room filled with sound, messy, imperfect, alive. Later that night, after the kids had gone, she found Ethan at the keyboard again, James beside him. The boy pressed a key, then another, a halting melody spilling out. James rested a hand on his shoulder, whispering, "That was beautiful, Ethan." Ethan glanced up, smile shy but real, and kept playing. Emma leaned against the wall, watching, her throat tight. She'd fought for this, for him, for Old Hollow, for herself. And damn if it didn't feel like home. James caught her eye, mouthing a silent, "Thank you." She nodded, stepping back to let them have their moment. Outside, the night was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt full instead of empty. She thought of Danny, of the music she'd played for him, and smiled. Sometimes healing didn't come from fixing what was broken. Sometimes it came from building something new, a song, a family, a second chance. Life's funny that way, ain't it? James Carter spent years chasing answers in boardrooms and checkbooks, but it was Emma's beat-up guitar that brought his son back. Ethan didn't need a cure, just someone to listen, to see him. And Old Hollow, it didn't need a mall, just a voice. Emma wasn't a teacher, wasn't a savior, just a girl with a song and a heart big enough to share it. We spend so much time looking for big fixes, but sometimes all it takes is a melody, a hand reaching out, and a little faith in the mess we call living. That's it, y'all. A story of music, trust, and second chances. Subscribe if you loved it, and comment your favorite moment below. I want to hear what hit you hardest.